Okay, now, what I like to think I'm an expert at is explaining why the public schools are so bad. And then I also like to try to explain how we're going to fix them. Now, this is a huge, fascinating subject. I would liken the public schools to a swamp, a jungle, something that you barely can see anything that's going on. You're not sure. It's dangerous, it's hostile, you can sink into the quicksand and never be seen from again. Okay, but as a practical matter, how am I going to explain this stuff to you? We can come in on different roads. I can do it in 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 50 minutes, or all day if somebody had the time and the patience. The first thing probably is to say we could talk about the people, the motives of these people. They're socialists. John Dewey was a socialist. They call themselves progressives. They've been working on this 100 years. They want to make the country. I mean, John Dewey to Obama is just a straight line. They want to make the country socialist. John Dewey came up with the idea, hey, why don't we take over the ed schools? We'll brainwash the teachers, make them teach the way we want. They'll go to the schools all across America, and they will brainwash the little children, who will then grow up to be adults, who will then accept a new kind of America. Well, this has turned out to be much more difficult than they thought, because, societies are inertial to some degree. They want to continue their traditions, and if the education establishment got away with it, they just off with this, off with this, off with it, like they were throwing switches. Well, it doesn't work like that. But by 1983, they had the country dumbed down to the extent that the Nation at Risk report concluded that the schools are so bad they might as well have been designed by a hostile foreign country. Now that's an amazing conclusion, and it really tells you everything you need. That was more than 30 years ago. The schools were terrible. The same people are in charge doing the same thing. The schools are worse, and they just keep getting worse. And if these people have their way, kids would go to school, they might learn to spell their name, and that would be it. When you hear these people, I think of them as lunatics. I was about to say these lunatic. Talk about the things that Johnny doesn't need to know. I mean, you're stunned. You're up against people who are just implacably in favor of ignorance. It doesn't matter what it is, they'll have a pretext. This is getting into their techniques, so that's jumping ahead, you might say. But anyway, let me just finish with the socialists. They are socialists, progressive, whatever you want to call them. They want to dumb the country down. They want to do it through the schools. By the 60s, 70s, 80s, they were already halfway to their goal, and it was officially reported in the Nation at Risk report. And there's studies and there's things done every year, and international testing. And back in the 50s, 60s, when they first were getting underway, a lot of very smart people wrote books. And one of my favorite is called Quackery in the Public Schools, 1951, by Albert Lin. The guy's just a businessman. He's a Harvard-educated guy in Boston, and he's got kids in school. He ends up on the school board, and it's like you get inside, and you realize you're inside of a lunatic asylum. And he was so stunned by how inefficient, how stupid the whole thing was, he wrote a book called Quackery in the Public Schools. And I think these books had the effect not of convincing our education establishment to shape up. No, it convinced them to be more sly. So that after, say, 1960, the tricks and the sophistries and things, instead of just saying, oh, we don't need to teach them, they would come up with more sophisticated stuff. Okay, so we've got socialists dumbing down the schools, doing a great job of it, and it being well recorded and well known to anybody who bothers to pay attention. And you have a tremendous amount of anecdotal evidence. Sometimes I think this teaches you more than anything. I first heard that college teachers were reporting that they had incoming freshmen who didn't know what 6 times 7 was. And the first thought is, that's not possible. Well, they don't teach memorization. They actually forbid it. They don't teach the multiplication table. They actually forbid it. So even doing all those problems over a year or two, you'd think that all that would sort of sink in, that it might be simpler just to memorize. You would just do it for yourself. I remember figuring out little techniques for memorizing some of these things. I can't even think of them now. 9 times 9 is 81, right? Well, 8 and 1 are 9, so there's a sort of a little symmetry there. 9 times 9 is 81. See, so oh yeah, it goes together like that. I remember thinking of these things for myself, trying to remember these things. But anyway, people get into college, don't know what 6 times 7 is, so you can just say it's finished right there. All right, so now that gives you the picture. It's very dense and complicated. We got lots of socialist scheming, and there's lots of them. There's 1,000 of them. They've got $1 billion to spend or $100 billion to spend every year. Massive budget, massive amounts of so-called front groups, interlocking front groups. This one says, oh, they're doing a great job, and this one over here says, oh, we need this, and this one over here says, oh, these good. And they just kiss each other's, whatever. And around and around. Can't think of any polite way to say it, we saw this especially with this Common Core push the last few years. Bill Gates gave money to 25 separate organizations whose purpose was to promote Common Core. And each of these organizations pretended to be an independent bunch of do-gooders. Well, they weren't. They were all on the same team, taking money from the same guy in order to make happen what he wants to happen. I mean, it's disgusting on the surface of it. I hope Bill Gates fails, because what they had planned for us was not good. They would have narrowed education down into the dumbest, and the whole time they would have been telling us that now we had higher standards. But saying that a bunch of children are going to be college-ready, career-ready, that's not saying that it's actually going to happen. They managed to tell the public, oh, but we'll have higher standards. They'll be more rigorous. That's like saying that next year my football team, everybody on it's going to be able to bench press 500 pounds. What do you think of that? Everyone can bench press 500 pounds? Yeah, that's the new standard on my team. Of course, they can't do that. They never will be able to do that. Maybe one guy can do that. I don't know. I'm just making it up as I go along, like the education establishment. All right, so now how do we look at the methods? We know the bad boys are working all the time. We know they're getting rid of content. Well, let me tell you my favorite content story. E.D. Hirsch was out in California. He's talking to not teachers, but principals and administrators, and he's telling them that they should memorize, they should learn basic knowledge as they go. And so this, I always think of her as a bimbo, witch of the highest order. And she stands there, well, Dr. Hirsch, in your opinion, what should a child in the first grade be required to know? And E.D. Hirsch says, well, I think they should know the names of the 3 main oceans, and the names of the 7 continents. Perfectly reasonable, just 10 words. I mean, a kid who gets interested in baseball probably learns, or national football, probably learns 100 words just having fun. And you know what this woman actually said? And this is what we're up against, so you got to focus on this, the mentality. She says, I can't imagine why our children would need to know that information. The names of the oceans and the continents. When you study American history, the Pilgrims came across the Atlantic Ocean. If you don't know what that body of water is called, how can you teach history? And so on around the world. So that woman to me is the problem. She is a poster girl for everything wrong in American education. That she, instead of saying, well, let's see what we can teach them, let's see how far we can go, she says, I don't see why our children would need to know that. Implying they're dumb, let's just keep them that way. Why upset them with knowledge? Why give them knowledge? I mean, it's such a weird thing. They don't have much now, and they don't miss it, so let's just keep them like that. Okay, enough sarcasm, right? Let's go on to the methods. There are 3 big ones, and there's 25 of them. Every one of them's bad. There's 10 or 12 main ones. 3 I'm going to mention just because of time. This way, I can easily do this in 3 hours if someone wanted me to go through each of the things and explain them in detail. But in a shorthand version, the dumbest thing in education now is called constructivism, and it basically forbids the teachers to teach. Principals actually call teachers into the office and say, this is a constructivist school. You mustn't teach directly anymore. Well, how are they going to learn? Well, that's not your concern. You just encourage them. You nudge them, and you encourage them, and you tell them how smart they are, but you don't actually teach them any specific facts. That's what constructivism is in the schools now. And that has happened because teachers have written me and told me these horror stories. That's constructivism. That first grades, K-12, all the way, every subject. Constructivism is now like a blanket. Think of a blanket soaked in something poisonous or a fume, and it's just pressing down on everybody. And nobody can get up because no matter where you go, constructivism says, oh, we don't need to teach that, don't teach this, on it goes. They found a way to get the ignorance level they wanted. Okay, let's look at math. New math, reform math, Common Core math, 40 years, 50 years of nonsense. They take simple things and make them complicated. They bring college level subjects down to the second grade. They don't teach the basic ways to do it. They find some exotic way that the Russian peasants use, and they make them memorize that. You see the most amazing videos on the internet where some child does the multiplication the regular way that we all know, and it takes 45 seconds to get the right answer. Meanwhile, there's this other thing on the blackboard, just scribble, 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 and the child gets the wrong answer. Very smart child, able to do all of that. I mean, able to learn these two methods. But this is called reform math. It's many different variations, but the same gimmicks. Spiraling, no mastery. Mastery is forbidden. Multiplication tables are forbidden. The common sense traditional way of doing things is forbidden. Everything's forbidden that makes sense. You just let in all the hooligans who are going to come into your house and wreck it. That's what you do. Okay, now we get to the prima donna, the prom queen of all quackery, and that is called whole word, plus about 10 other titles. Nowadays it's called balanced literacy, sight words, dulce words, high frequency words. The basic gimmick here was to say that phonics was old and unnecessary. Throw it away. And then what children should do is memorize words as designs. So I show you this design. I say, this is pronounced house. Say house. Okay. Now you've got it, right? But you can't explain to yourself or anybody else why it's pronounced house. It's just arbitrary. And all the other symbols you try to memorize are like that. They're like the little icons up in the corner. Well, those are pictorial. But English language, the words are not pictorial. The word blue does not look blue. See, it's just an arbitrary squiggle. It's a graphic design. Now, you can do 10, 20, 30, 50, whatever. Some kids are smart. Verbally, visually, they've got a good memory. They can do a couple hundred. A really smart guy might do a couple thousand. But that's it. Ordinary guy can't even do 100 a year. So he never learns to read. In the old days, you learned to read in your first grade. You're reading. You can actually pick up a book and read it. You might read it slowly. I am going down, that kind of, sounding it out kind of thing. First, second grade. But with sight words, you never learn to read because you're learning 50 and then 100, and by the time you turn to the 200th, you're forgetting all the early ones. And you don't ever get automaticity. And if you're not naming those words in a half a second, you're not at reading speed. You're not even close. So you know how you can watch TV and see a favorite movie with a favorite actor, and you can't place his name right away? Oh, that's that guy. He was in Star Trek. He's, come on. And you're asking your friend to tell you. You know everything about this guy. You love this guy. He's a great actor. Captain Kirk. What's his actual name? Oh, yeah. It's and you can't bring it up. Well, that's the way it is. That's what reading is for sight word readers. It's right there in their memory somewhere, but bringing it up because this little design does not contain any clues, where the phonics shows you that all English words are full of clues. They have letters in there that have the same sounds over and over. So you see a B in the middle of a word, you know it's B, or at the beginning or wherever. So once kids learn to take those syllables apart, those letters apart, then they can read. The kid learns the alphabet, he learns the sounds. It's an amazing thing, phonics. Some people figure it out, but most people have to be taught explicitly. Some might take 4 months, might take 6 months, but it doesn't matter. Somewhere in the first grade, they will learn to read, and that's what we have to get back to. If there's a school that's sending home sight words, you know that school is incompetent. You know the people in charge of that school are demons. Can I say demons? Anyway, they're bad boys from the education establishment. Think of them as like gang members coming into your neighborhood and enforcers or something, collecting for protection or something like in the mafia days. So it's a dreadful thing. The idea of making children memorize sight words. These children in the 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, and they're looking at little 3 and 4 letter words, and they confuse them because they look kind of similar. See, English is full of little little straight lines, I, F, T, so on, and a P, B, D, they all look alike. And I mean, as soon as you get more than a couple letters, and even then, children can't keep them straight. It's very difficult. And if you're going to do it, you have to draw them over and over, like the Chinese do with their ideograms. But they have much fewer ideograms, and they don't change. Ours have upper and lower case. So already you're doomed. The moment you learn THE lowercase, when it goes to THE uppercase, it looks completely different. All three letters change significantly. Because in graphic design, like the difference between a colon and a semicolon, how tiny that is, and yet it's a completely different thing. Or between a period and a comma, completely different things. Change the whole meaning of a sentence. So, anyway, so that's how they do it. They have bogus techniques. So you want to fix the schools? Get rid of the bogus techniques. Get rid of the education establishment. Make them behave. I would say start starving them. 10% a year would be a good start. Make them fire administrators. These people are waging war on the country, and they treat it's a business because everybody in it is doing well. They make their money by dumbing down the country. They invent the techniques, and then they have to enforce them. And if teachers get out of line and try to teach their own way that they learned when they were young or from their other teachers, the administrators have to step in and reprimand them and make sure. And you know, if Common Core had its way, you'd have a camera in every room, and they'd have been forcing those teachers to teach just this information just this way. Everything they said was horrible a few years ago, they would have made that the law of the land. And then no teacher would ever be allowed to mention another thing. But what real teachers should be teaching to what's in the newspapers to some degree. If there's a crash or an earthquake somewhere, you talk about it because it's on the news. The child's going to hear about it, so you use that. You use all the hooks you can, all the, what do they call them, visual aids, movies, TV,